afternoon. I'm taking the silence and the slightly dimming of light as the cue to start. I think people coming in the back from lunch. I hope everyone's not too sleepy after the carb overload. This session is, well, let me introduce myself first. My name is Mary-Claude Hemming. I am Director of External Affairs at the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. For those of you who don't know, our members build and maintain the UK's public infrastructure, so we're very much looking forward to building all the new exciting projects in the north and across the UK. So very, very timely. This session is about how we can successfully deliver the strategic transport plan. It's going to be for an hour. There'll be some speeches and a panel discussion and the opportunity to have questions from the floor. I've been asked to remind everybody that don't forget to tweet your comments and the hashtag, I've never said this in public before, hashtag #OneNorth. So without further ado, I would like to invite Iain Craven to give the keynote speech for this session. Iain is the Finance Director at Transport for the North. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We've heard a lot today about the great work that has gone into developing the North's first statutory transport plan and the exciting proposals that are contained within it. Tucked away in the last 20 pages or so is some critically important thinking about how we deliver against those proposals. And I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes running through the key themes that we need to address. These include spatial planning, innovation, education and skills, analysis and appraisal, and last but by no means least, funding. I'm sure you're all well aware by now that what we're not doing at Transport for the North, or what we're doing at Transport for the North, isn't just about transport. It's about how we can grow the economy in a sustainable and inclusive way to make the North a better place to live. This requires an ambitious plan, but also means that we need to be ambitious with regard to the challenges that need to be overcome in order for that ambitious plan to be delivered. And many of these challenges aren't just applicable to us in the North. They apply to all over the UK, which is why I'm happy to have Maria from Midlands Connect, as well as the other panel members with us here today. We need to make sure that we learn from one another. The first piece of the how jigsaw that I'm going to talk about is spatial planning. We need to understand how our work will align with new approaches to housing and spatial planning more generally. This is already starting to happen. In Parliament last week, Homes for the North unveiled a report demonstrating how investment in housing can complement planned investment in transport and infrastructure. However, it is a complex area that will require ongoing collaboration with a wide range of stakeholders. We want to work with our partners to ensure that future strategic housing, commercial and industrial developments are well connected and have high expectations of developers to provide access to public transport facilities, cycle parking and storage, and electric charging, all of which will support a greener and cleaner road network. Next, innovation, technology and research. We want to harness innovative measures and encourage smart technology to support the delivery of our pan-northern objectives. By embracing innovative solutions now, we can influence future infrastructure and transport connectivity. Regions which support innovation and create new technological solutions grow faster than those that do not. Furthermore, investing in research and development can provide a reliable pipeline of skills in the North, which can help attract and retain employers. Finally, innovation extends beyond new technology. New approaches for the design and delivery of projects, as well as the management, operation and maintenance of existing infrastructure, and funding and financing models, can all support the transformation of the economy and improved quality of life for those living and working in the North. Thirdly, education and skills. Improving education and skills to support economic prosperity is a priority at a national as well as a local level. At the same time, delivering the North's ambitious transport plans will require a skilled workforce. The industrial strategy and the transport infrastructure and skills strategy set out that more needs to be done to address sector-specific skills gaps, including urgent skill shortages across the construction and transportation sectors. Analysis shows that demand for highly skilled workers in the transport sector has increased, which has led to the creation of specialist colleges and training facilities within and connected to transport. These include the National College for High-Speed Rail in Doncaster, the Newcastle College Rail Academy, modal training in Immingham, and the Advanced Manufacturing College in Carlisle. However, there is a long way to go. Analysis by Engineering UK indicates that in the years up to 2024, over 200,000 people with level 3 and above engineering skills are required per year to meet the demands of the UK economy. Based on current educational pipeline, they estimate an average shortfall of trained engineers of around 100,000 a year. There will be high demand for some key skills and high competition across sectors. Currently, skills provision is fragmented, not targeted, and there is little emphasis on transport as a sector outside of rail. So we need to change that. And again, I know it's not just a problem for the north of England. Fourthly, analysis and appraisal. What benefits are taken into account and how these are measured is of critical importance in understanding the need for investment in transport infrastructure and in demonstrating the benefits that flow from it. TfN's analytical framework will provide an overarching approach that can be applied across the north with the overall goal of providing commonly understood and agreed data and commonly agreed means by which that data can be used for both forecasting and in the support of investment decisions. This is being developed hand in hand with a range of stakeholders, including central government, partners, and academics, and will be compliant with the requirements of DfT's WebTag approach, whilst at the same time capturing wider benefits that are not properly recognised by traditional appraisal models. Finally, there is the question of how these ambitious plans are to be paid for. The estimated funding requirement in the STP over 30 years amounts to 60 to 70 billion pounds. At the upper end of that range, that is an average of 2.3 billion pounds per annum, an increase of 900 million pounds per year from current expenditure levels. However, while substantial sums, we need to remind ourselves that the area covered by the plan has a population of 15.4 million people, includes nearly 300 towns and cities, and has an economy that supports nearly 8 million jobs. Moreover, whilst the North's economy has undoubted strengths, much of the transport infrastructure upon which it relies is in need of investment to help close the productivity gap that currently exists between the North and other parts of the country. Our work, summarised in the STP and set out more fully in TfN's funding framework, which is available on our website, indicates that our proposals are consistent with the government's fiscal remit, and that even at the upper end, the required investment is achievable within national funding constraints. The interventions in the investment programme are ambitious, but they are realistic. The decision to fund the programme is a choice that can be made by government within existing funding paradigms and will be a key element of a sustained attempt to rebalance the UK economy to the benefit of all its regions and the nation as a whole. TfN's funding framework itself sets out the principles to be applied to funding the programme, where funding could and should be sourced, the rules and governance in relation to how it will be spent, and how financial risk around the programme should be managed. The key principles: that funding decisions need to be based on an evidence base that includes social benefits as well as economic ones, that locally raised funding should be locally spent, and that the approach to funding transport projects should be consistent with the underlying objectives of the project being funded. These provide a framework within which the funding approach for future schemes can be delivered. Our work indicates that the programme will largely need to be centrally funded. Whilst we have identified some ability to raise third-party funding, we need to be absolutely realistic regarding the extent to which these sources can contribute to delivering the programme, particularly in the early years. Our work, however, indicates that how decisions are made in relation to projects is as important as the source of the funding that will pay for them. Almost regardless of the level of funding that are made available by this or future governments, the ability to deliver on our proposals will depend on the ability of TfN to direct the funding that is available towards the North's priorities. If TfN is not able to exert greater control over strategic transport investment in the North than is currently the case, it is highly unlikely that the strategic transport plan that's been introduced to you today will be delivered. TfN is therefore seeking to move to a position where it becomes responsible for a combined regulatory settlement, i.e. one that covers both road and rail expenditure, that will cover strategic transport investment in the North. This is not straightforward and will require detailed discussions with central government, national agencies, and our partner, local and combined authorities, as well as further development of TfN as an organisation. However, having spent 2.5 years developing a plan that is supported by all of TfN's elected leaders and business representatives, it's clear that the funding arrangements need to be put in place to allow the vision that is set out, and more importantly, the benefits that flow from it, both regionally and nationally, to be delivered. None of what I've been talking about today is easy. Some of the things I've mentioned are challenges that have existed for decades and for which there is no quick fix. Delivering this plan and its benefits will require the collaboration of numerous organisations, both public and private, all working towards a common set of aims. However, given the size of the potential prize in terms of jobs and living standards, it is a challenge that we have to accept and overcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iain. Wow, what a fantastic and exciting challenge. My next speaker is Maria Machancoses. Maria is Director of the Midlands Connect, which is a subnational transport body for the Midlands. She is also Interim Director of the Midlands Engine, which is a partnership looking at economic opportunities for the future in the Midlands. So without further ado, let me introduce Maria.
Right, good afternoon. Seriously delighted to be here this afternoon, and coming from the Midlands, I tell you what, it's a bit tough for me, step up and congratulate my colleagues in Transport for the North for first delivering a statutory transport plan, the first one in the country. Tick. Also to become the first statutory national transport body. Yes, the first one in the country. And here comes the Midlands behind, catching up with the North, because you've done superbly. And it really is important you understand how superbly you have done in terms of coming together as one. Actually showing us the rest of the UK and England, in particular in England, that regions can really work and the voice of regions can really make a difference. So let me first of all congratulate you as a North, but also Transport for the North, because I know it's been very hard and very intensive in terms of coming up with the transport plan that you are launching today. So big congratulations. But I'm here actually to talk about why the Midlands could be excited and should be excited about the transport plan that we're seeing here in the North. I think it's important that the North understand that the Midlands and the North, Midlands Connect and Transport for the North, are determined to continue to make the case for investment in the regions nationally, but actually most important, to make sure that boundaries don't become all of a sudden regional boundaries too. So, the Midlands have got pretty strong gateways from Staffordshire, Cheshire, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, actually, and even into Wales. So just to reassure you that we are extremely committed to work with Transport for the North to ensure that those relationships, those transport networks, that connectivity that brings people and businesses of the Midlands and the North together retain that sort of effective role that they have for the economy as well as social mobility. So that was my main purpose, to confirm and to reassure you all the importance of collaboration, the importance of regions and one voice, and to start investing in raising awareness of the importance of devolution and rebalancing the economy at a national level. But I like to explain what Midlands Connect is doing at the moment and how we define ourselves and how we might see the benefits of TfN and the North coming together, as I mentioned earlier. Don't forget, in the years to come, we're going to be hearing more and more about the challenges of financing national infrastructure programs like those set up for Network Rail, Highways England. Indeed, tonight you will hear a lot about HS2 and the views of HS2 on the media. And we'll also hear about Crossrail 2 and indeed the importance of NPR for the North. Now, these are schemes that are actually of national importance. And we cannot be looking at them from a parochial perspective. We need the Midlands and the North to ensure that those national investment programs work for the Midlands and work for the North. So I'm working very closely with Barry, and I was delighted to be in Parliament last week, ensuring that HS2 remains a priority and is delivered all the way to the North. The Midlands is already HS2 is already being built in the Midlands. If you visit Birmingham today, we are extremely proud. There's huge energy going on in the city. But why would you stop HS2 London to Birmingham only? Why would you do that? You will create capacity between London and Birmingham, which is a massive issue. But what really excites the Midlands, is the links between the Midlands and the North. And that means the Y network, all the way to Leeds, all the way to Manchester. And I cannot tell you how businesses see that as a huge opportunity. They see as an untapped market where the Midlands and the North at the moment are not talking really to each other the way they should because of transport connectivity being so poor. So here we are, we're working together, making sure that HS2 comes and becomes a reality. So national programs that work for the regions, and we're also making sure that we have got regional, pan-Midlands, pan-North schemes that work for the regions and for the country too. So we are promoting the Midlands. I mean, if I may, one of the USPs of the Midlands, we always relate to the story, the children's story of we're going on a bear hunt. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So no matter where you are in the country, you cannot go over the Midlands. You cannot go under the Midlands. You've got to go through it. So may I say, every transport infrastructure that you got in the Midlands, I will say also serves a function for the North. And we are extremely proud of that position, and we want to make sure that it works for you as well as for the Midlands. So that's why we are also promoting the Midlands Rail Hub, and that's why we're working with the Transport for the North to make sure that your strategic interventions, your strategic investment program works for the Midlands too. The one point that was mentioned earlier is the point about innovation and how we can accelerate investment. I mean, in the Midlands, and I'm sure this is mirrors here in the North too, there's been decades and decades of promises, commitments, studies that have gone nowhere. And the beauty and the excitement about having Transport for the North and a statutory plan, transport plan for the North, is that all of a sudden it takes it to another level. These cannot be ignored anymore by government. These cannot be ignored anymore by national agencies. There has to be a collaboration, a stronger collaboration than ever, to make it happen. And that's why the Midlands looks kind of selfishly to the North in that sense, because we are still, we've got a transport strategy for the Midlands, I have to say. We did that 2 years ago, but we need to firm up. It really is important we change the culture of how Westminster and government perceive the allocation, the investment of major transport infrastructure in the regions. And that's why I congratulate the North today, because they have definitely been able to articulate that quite clearly at all scale. And it really is important because we know, as I said, the next few years, as the Brexit cloud and the fog still is over us, we need to provide our businesses and our towns and cities the greatest certainty we can always have. We can no longer just talk about ideas or projects or vision and ambition. We really can no longer afford to do that. We need to provide them that certainty, that commitment to really deliver what we promise. And therefore, what I am going to work very closely with the North is what weight will this strategic transport plan have in the decision-making process at national level? What weight will government give so these schemes do happen at the right time, in the right places for the North, the same way that the Midlands wants those schemes to happen in the Midlands too? And just, you know, I need to be very careful about this. I'm actually a great admirer of London, but if we look back at the last 10, 15 years, I'll just give you a nice list. The Northern Line extension cost 1.1 billion. This is only in the last 10, 15 years in London. London Waterloo, the Eurostar, it was 800 million. King Cross upgrade, 250 million. London Overground rolling stock, 300 million. Victoria Line modernisation, 700 million. Crossrail 1, 17.6 billion. London Bridge upgrade, 1 billion. And the upgrade of St Pancras, 5.8 billion. And Stratford International DLR, 200 million. Altogether about 27 billion, and on top of that, of course, Crossrail 2. Now listen, I am not complaining about London getting everything. We need to stop doing that. What I do admire about London, and that's why it's become a global city, a competitive capital, is that they do get the importance of infrastructure to support economy, housing, growth overall. So it is really important that, you know, what you're doing here in the North is saying, you know, 74 million, 64 billion, I really don't mind. It's having that certainty and that clarity in what you want. And we shouldn't feel bad or guilty about having that clarity and that certainty of what we want, because London has been doing it for a long, long time. And we shouldn't feel in the Midlands and in the North guilty for having equal ambition and equal sort of determination to have it in place, not just talked about in our part of the UK. So I just think I'll finish it there, just to really, I seriously wanted to come and say the Midlands is really proud of how the North have come together. The Midlands is also very proud about how we have also come together. The Midlands and the North, this is our time. I think the UK, and in particular England, is going to require the North and the Midlands more than ever to take this country forward. The potential in terms of productivity and economic growth, it's in these regions, not just London anymore. We cannot rely on London anymore, and therefore, this is the time to invest in the regions. And that's what I was absolutely determined to come and give you all a big hand of applause from the Midlands, and hopefully the Midlands will follow suit. But it really is an honor to be here and presenting our ambition to, and I hope we can work together in many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm sure you'll agree with me, that was such a passionate speech advocating the benefits of investment across the UK, in the Midlands, and alongside that, and working in combination in transport for the North. I think what we've learned for the last two speakers is that collaboration and shared learning are key to rebalancing the economy. And as a Londoner who is desperate to move out of London, I can't wait for the new investment to start. Now, my third speaker today is Dan Large, who is Head of Infrastructure at business organisation, the CBI. Dan has a strong record of pushing high-profile campaigns, most notably having worked on the campaign for high-speed rail. I don't know whether he'll be looking forward to the programme this evening or not. Dan has also spent a lot of time in the North, as I have. I was at university in York. Dan has 2 degrees from University of Newcastle and the University of Chester. So I will not carry on speaking and invite Dan to come and address us.
You can throw in Wigan and Lancaster along the way. I'm afraid I've spent my life being a chippy northerner in London. Yes, tonight's television programme, looking forward to immensely. It's called The Great Train Robbery, obviously terribly objective. I'm pretty sure that if you've got through your post-brownie carbohydrates that you'll have figured out what the plot one of that's going to be. The CBI, I'm head of infrastructure at the CBI, so I've newly beefed up infrastructure team there and cover all joys from public sector procurement post-Brexit through to defence, and somewhere on that journey is transport. In fact, transport's arguably the largest part of my brief, and I'm delighted that TfN's invited me here to speak today. By bringing together all of the business and political leaders with a shared set of aims, TfN's made significant progress in enabling the whole of the North to speak with one voice on some mutually beneficial priorities. But, and I take a slightly sort of policy-ish view of most of these things, I'm afraid, there's also needs to be a clearer view of TfN's role and function, with the uncertainty remaining as to the extent that TfN can influence future decisions. And I know Iain alighted on this earlier. There must be a clear roadmap for the future role of TfN and all transport bodies, alongside formalised, consistent relationships with both the Department for Transport and delivery bodies. There should be clarity on strategic transport bodies' roles in planning, sequencing and prioritisation, and the future options to draw down further power from central government to deliver their plans most effectively. To be viewed as a success over time, businesses will expect to see evidence of the influence strategic transport bodies have had in using their regional voice to steer the strategies and work of national bodies. Iain and the transport plan said that if TfN is not able to exert more control over strategic transport investment in the north, and the system that currently delivers infrastructure continues in its current form, it is unlikely that the strategic transport plan will be delivered. This matches entirely the CBI's engagement through its recent driving delivery report. For whilst businesses see opportunity in devolution, with the most optimism across the three northern regions for that devolution, the optimism is waning. The reasons given for this are a lack of clarity in linking regional growth and infrastructure. All parts of the country need a better understanding of how growth potential will link to much needed investment and infrastructure delivery. Complexity in decision-making and inconsistency between regions. The planning and decision-making progress is just too complex, with varying bodies having varying responsibilities across regions. And a lack of transparency in how investment will be made, particularly on how government makes decisions and how to influence these. And that's why the TfN funding framework referenced earlier is so important. On funding and financing, in preparation for the comprehensive spending review, the CBI will be exploring options for the 1 to 1.2% fiscal remit set down by the Chancellor to become a minimum infrastructure spending requirement, not just a nice to have. In turn, further detail will also be required on the regional breakdown of how this funding would be allocated and invested to provide regional bodies with the certainty and clarity to plan over a longer-term basis. All local areas also need the certainty to invest and deliver their plans over the longer term. Whilst national rail and road networks benefit from multi-million-pound investment planned for many years in advance, funding for local transport capital spending is less stable and more subject to year-on-year fluctuation. The CBI has highlighted the comprehensive spending review as an opportunity for the government to show a vote of confidence in devolution and the ability for improvements in local infrastructure to drive growth. To provide longer-term clarity, the government should consolidate the number of funding pots for local transport investment, better aligning to improve connectivity between transport modes and to invest across all forms of infrastructure. Or if you're a politician who likes to grab a headline, the pots your potholes are repaired from. Anybody looking at the budget book would struggle to establish which of about 5 pots that was. The real elephant in the room for me for much has been said about elephants today, and probably will be on Channel 4 this evening, is skills. People say, if we were given a £70 billion cheque tomorrow, we couldn't deliver this. Well, that's good, because we're not going to be given a £70 billion cheque tomorrow, and the skills pipeline is a little bit longer than tomorrow. But how do we meet this skills challenge in the North? A long-term vision at national level and getting business much closer to the table, being better collaborators, is important. Business cannot be a bystander in this. We have a 4-point set of asks. First, we need better careers guidance to raise young people's aspirations. Studies have shown that a young person receives 4 engagements with businesses at school. They're 5 times less likely to be unemployed. Secondly, we need to increase the quality and provision of higher-level technical education. Major changes to the skills landscape are underway, and the foundations of an effective system are in place through the apprenticeship levy, employer-led apprenticeship standards, and T-levels. Thirdly, we need to be reskilling and upskilling seriously. 2/3 of the 2030 workforce having already left full-time education and are in employment. More companies are developing strategies for up and reskilling, but these need to be a part of every single training strategy. Also, a role for government. The CBI is supporting the development of the National Retraining Scheme. Fourthly and finally, we need a place-based industrial strategy that puts skills at its heart, and would like to see a greater emphasis on making skills an integrated part of the industrial strategy, with a drive to empower skills decisions on a regional level. For example, how can we develop a system of apprenticeship levy pooling that allows companies to support supply chain training in their regional sector by bringing together funds? And also a skills point on innovation. TfN should spearhead efforts to encourage skills from outside the built environment sector into the organizations delivering innovation for it and its region. Other sectors are way ahead of the built environment sector in training and growing the volume of skills needed to innovate, whether technologically or in terms of new processes. TfN should keep in mind that many skilled workers, particularly younger workers looking to progress quickly, young people in a hurry, care as much about the social impact of their work as they do about reward and benefits. Therefore, in making construction an attractive place for skilled workers who can deliver innovative solutions, TfN should encourage stakeholders to link planned infrastructure programs to the social and economic benefits of delivering this innovative infrastructure. For example, the positive impact on the environment and making the North a smart home for transport, or just generally increasing the prosperity of the region so that they feel they have a stake in it. So that's a few thoughts from business. We more than recognize our role in this process and look forward to working with TfN and the government in partnership to make this plan a success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. We've heard the voice of large business, and now I'm a little bit biased to my former employer, the Federation of Small Businesses. I would like to introduce Chris Manka to be our final panel speaker. Chris is Regional Northwest Chairman for the Federation of Small Businesses. He has a long history of volunteering for the FSB, and he is here to represent the voice of small business in the Northwest. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Basically, the FSB is a member-led organisation. It's got about 170,000 members across the nation. I was part of the team a couple of years ago now, well, probably nearer 3 years ago. We delivered a Northern Powerhouse strategy for small businesses. And it was a team of about 20 of us from across the North that got together and put this thing together. We highlighted certain things that have been a recurring theme throughout, and we like to think that we set the conversation going in some ways. It focused on getting a digital infrastructure in place that was truly world-class, not something that's just better than London or better than Shoreditch, but literally better than what Korea can offer. We also focused on skills to actually get the right kind of skills coming through the system so that you can genuinely plan 20, 30, 40 years ahead. And also we focused on infrastructure, partly because we live in an area that's been basically almost hamstrung with a Victorian infrastructure that we need to turn around and actually start using to our advantage. The other thing that report also brought out was to stop viewing the north as being Manchester or Liverpool or Hull or Leeds. If you draw a line from Liverpool through Sheffield to Hull, up to Newcastle, across to Carlisle, that landmass is approximately the kind of thing that the Chinese would look on as an industrial zone, or the Americans would look on as an industrial zone. Same for the South Americans. And it's with that worldwide perspective that this report was delivered, that this is an opportunity for the Northwest, well, the North in general, to actually come together properly as a region to actually benefit the country. So that transformation, a Chinese client or an American client, doesn't matter whether you're 30 miles this way or that way. As long as they know that you're in the north, they can relate to that. And it's not a big area to cover. You know, we're talking 100 miles maximum across. So it was with those sort of perspectives that report was written, and obviously very well received. We do have this legacy of the Victorian era, which was the start of the Industrial Revolution, which taught everybody else in the world how to trade internationally and the opportunities of trading internationally. And to an extent, we need to reclaim that. I'm basically pushing for involvement in all of these schemes so that we can ensure that the small companies, the small, medium-sized enterprises, can provide the creativity and the know-how to actually make these things work. We need creativity. We need people who can react quickly and can make the most of opportunities, and we need creative thinking. And this is what characterizes small businesses throughout this nation. So on that basis, I think the FSB's got an awful lot to offer for these great big schemes that are quite often dominated by bureaucrats. And we want to make it something that's much more worthwhile and understood at the grassroots level by the people who are going to help make these things happen, but also more importantly, to channel these funds not only for the cost of the infrastructure, but if you keep it local, it actually boosts the economy because that money will be re-spent within the local economy, which is of great importance. So on that note, I shall finish and we'll carry on with the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was going to say don't sit down because we're all going to sit on the panel seat. So can I invite the panel to please take their seats on the stage? It's always that awkward moment now where no one knows where to sit. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure that the audience found that very useful and very informative, and it shed some light on some areas that some people didn't know about. I am going to keep my questions brief. I have a whole list of questions, and some that I made up, which may get more and more sporadic, but I think it's more important to get some questions from the audience. So I'm going to ask 2 questions, and then I am going to invite you, the guests, to please put your hand up. So please think about your questions. So I think my opening question is mainly to Marie and Iain. You've outlined the vision, you've outlined your strategy as how you envisage getting there. What's the next stage? What do you need from government? What do you need from us? What do you need from the future generation in order to deliver the vision of rebalancing the economy?
So that's exactly where we are at the moment in the Midlands. We got the vision 2 years ago. I think what we need more than anything is clear prioritization, right? And that's why Midlands Connect is being seen at mainly by businesses. Within that strategic plan, within that vision, what is the priorities in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years? And you don't do it just because of transport, because of the capacity or constraints or electrification or maintenance or whatever. You need to do it with a real link to what sectors, what industries, what population, what housing. You need to hammer it down to the Midlands and understand what it means for the Midlands, and therefore the case-making activity becomes more clear. Getting the consensus across an area like the Midlands or the North amongst the civic and business leaders is very hard as it is, but it's even harder when you need to let them all agree what needs to happen next, what next, and when. And that is the maturity that we're all going to have to show here. And that's when government, I will say, will have absolutely no choice but to deliver, because there'll be that kind of certainty as well. So really important, prioritization and links to the economy, to specific sectors, to housing, to towns, cities, population, rather than just transport.
Thank you. Iain?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mentioned it in the talk I gave earlier. There's a huge amount of collaboration required in order to deliver this plan, and that's sector collaboration across transport, because no one body has got all the powers that are required or all the decision making that's required to deliver this plan. But if we take a step back and we remember that what we're trying to do here is grow the economy, is to create inclusive transformational economic growth, then it's not just about transport. It's about all the things I mentioned about spatial planning, about skills and education, about innovation. And so that increases probably tenfold the amount of collaboration that is required in order to deliver these plans. And actually, it's not one big thing that we need. It's lots and lots of hard work across lots and lots of different organisations in order to deliver the vision that's set out in this plan.
Thank you. Chris and Dan, do you have anything to add to that, and sort of the wider context in getting these visions enabled?
I think it's just the idea of collaboration is really important, and I think to not overlook the creative input that you can find in smaller companies, and also throughout our educational establishments. We've got startup hubs in all the universities that can suddenly stumble across something that could be transformational. And I know I've gone on about the Victorians, but you almost take inspiration from things like the Manchester Ship Canal that was built, and all of a sudden Salford became the 5th biggest port in the UK, which is staggering because it's 35 miles inland. And so it's that scale of vision that we need to try and replicate. Steve Rotherham mentioned earlier about the links between Liverpool and Hull that should be made a lot stronger. And they should. It needs to be done. On an international level, we've got all the makings of being a truly great region, and it's just not being done properly at the moment. And I think this plan goes an awful long way to addressing that.
Yeah, I think on rebalancing the economy, I love this term because it gets bandied about so much, and people just expect it'll happen when you drop a few institutions out of the sky and perhaps a train line or two. The government has taken steps to address how these major infrastructure decisions are made. Transport business cases, the rebalancing toolkit. Fine, okay. But this system still isn't ensuring that investment is reaching areas where investment is not already present. The system shows bias to areas that are already demonstrating some success. So I'm not proposing large because the answer to this question is much bigger than my brain. But I'm not proposing that we go all out, build it and they will come, in terms of making these decisions, taking a punt, saying, okay, fine, we'll have a railway there, and hope that creates some inward investment. Otherwise, we'll end up like Spain with unused EU-funded motorways and railway lines. Yeah, it's crazy. But we need to find a happier medium between the business case model we have now, where, frankly, people just make stuff up, and build it and they will come. Okay? I mean, I remember going back all the way to the original case for high-speed rail, that we were having to predict how many tens of thousands of jobs that would create. And I mean, all you can do is economic modelling. And you know, some people will say liar, some people will say whoop. You know, it's not a satisfactory system. We have to find a sweet spot between those two approaches in order to ensure that places like the north of England get the benefit, economic benefit they deserve, and that the economy is genuinely rebalanced, and it's not just lip service by saying project here, project there.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to open it up to the floor. Put your hands up if you want to ask a question. 3 people. 4 people. I'm going to ask the lovely lady in red as the voice of young people, and I think it's very important to encourage people, young people, to get involved in political debate. So, first question to the floor, the lady in red.
So, I'm Amanda. I am a youth councillor from North Lincolnshire, so in Scunthorpe. So, as a young person, and the discussions that we've had, because transport became a problem for us as young people in our area, and it was something that was debated in the House of Commons with our Member of Youth Parliaments and became a regional campaign for us all. So, as a young person, I would like to ask you if any of you would actually be interested in actually getting young people involved and actually asking their opinion and their views on what they think will make this strategic plan actually successful for them in their future, in their lifetime. Because I think that the more that young people get heard, the more chance that we have of having a say. If we can't have a say about what the hell our government does, but we can have a say about how we get around places and how we can afford it, that will be very, very beneficial to all of our futures.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Very good.
Maria, would you like to go first?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. We kept saying in our technical team that we seem to be constantly planning for what we understand now the system will work, but we really not have got a good insight into the future generations. The millennials seem to think completely different about mobility and how they plan their work and where they'll go for work or live or even for cultural recreation. I mean, we seriously, we all being faced in the Midlands, particularly, we're having a lot of debate about autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. Where will the manufacturing world will go next to sustain our economy? And we're thinking, actually, we need to talk to the young people because they'll have a completely perceived idea of what they'll use the electric or autonomous vehicles for. So I couldn't agree more. I think we need to really embrace the young generation and the young views in this long-term planning of infrastructure.
Iain, anything to add?
Yeah, it's not really, I mean, there's been a huge consultation process around the strategic transport plan, although not performed by me, I hasten to add, as a finance director. I mean, I'd be really interested in having a think about how we go about doing that. I'd be welcome to have a chat afterwards if you've got any thoughts. I mean, it's something I'd like to get some of my colleagues maybe involved in. But yeah, I think we could do that.
Thank you. Right. Gentleman in the blue shirt and the blue jacket.
Chris Jackson from the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. We now have a plan, which is absolutely fantastic, and I'm delighted to have been involved in reviewing the draft before we got to the final plan. So, I'll join in the congratulations as well. Coupled with the plan, we also have a programme of interventions and investment plan, which identifies those key investments and key interventions. But they are that at this stage. Now, Iain's talked in his introduction about the appraisal process for converting those interventions into real delivered projects. How are we going to ensure that that appraisal process actually has sufficient clout to make sure that we don't lose what we've already invested in creating the interventions that we believe to be important for the North? And if we think, I'll use the C word, if we think about Cumbria, he said, go on, think about it. If we think about Cumbria, and the issues that there are in terms of east-west across the Lake District National Park, and the strategic development corridor that's been identified in linking the energy coasts. What we have there was an economic model which would have been fantastic if Moorside was going ahead. What influence and how do we make certain that our appraisal overcomes that sort of hurdle, that sort of change, so that the energy coast in Cumbria continues to get the transport investment that it needs as part of the strategic development corridor? So it's all about the robustness of the economic appraisal, the social appraisal, and how we don't lose what we've started to get. Thank you.
Iain?
Yeah, probably best to break that into parts. In terms of appraisal methodologies, one of the core pieces of work that TfN is doing is around an analytical framework that looks more broadly at benefits and impacts of transport infrastructure investment than current WebTag processes do. Now, TfN is not, I would stress, seeking some kind of free pass from government processes. We still need to comply with the Green Book. We still need to justify investment. We do need to be aware, though, that many of the projects that are included in our investment programme are designed to try and stimulate economic investment as much as they're designed to relieve the effects of economic investment. And I think there's a reasonably commonly understood phenomena that it's easier to kind of score points in WebTag if you are relieving congestion than it is if you're trying to create a bit of economic activity in the first place. I think in terms of how you make that appraisal stick, I think the first thing you've got to do is agree with the department and government that is the basis on which you're going to make decisions. I think then it comes back to another area that I discussed, which is around control over funding flows. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that TfN needs to have billions of pounds flowing in and out of its bank accounts. Nice. But what it does need is the ability to direct funding to northern priorities as set out in the transport plan and the investment programme. And it does come back to a level of control. And actually the funding section in the strategic transport plan sets out some of Transport for the North's ambitions in that area. In terms of how you react to something like a Moorside, I think there's two things. One is that what we've been preparing at the moment are program cases, so they're not aimed at specific local projects. Obviously, that was a major investment that was planned, but that strategic case was at a much kind of broader level than that, and I think part of it is just revisiting all through the business case process to make sure that the underlying assumptions that you've made remain. But I think that challenge is faced by any major infrastructure investment. I don't think it's specific to Transport for the North.
Absolutely agree. I endorse everything. I think one of the areas that we are kind of exploring a bit more, particularly from a Midlands Connect perspective, is the influence bit, right? So you're absolutely right. We could develop business cases in isolation, and we'll present a business case to the FD, and they'll say, okay, that is, thank you very much, pile of another 250. So we'll get back to you, kind of thing. Now, what the good thing about some national transport bodies is if they are considered serious, like they were intended to do, you're gonna have to have a special relationship with national agencies. So I work very closely with Network Rail and How is England. So we undertake the piece of work with the national agencies who, no doubt, absolutely no doubt, because that's the right thing they need to do, is to look at the transport infrastructure from a national perspective. Because let's not forget, railways and roads perform a national role. Okay, let's not ignore that. That would be phenomenally wrong if we did that. But what it does do is it helps national agencies to understand the impact, or what will be the decremental impact, should they not invest it at the right time and with some tweaks, so it does accommodate Midlands economy, for instance. So that's what our role is. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that whatever we produce, whatever we develop through Midlands Connect, Transport for the North, an Economic Highland, or whatever part of the country, those can no longer be ignored. And there is a lifetime, isn't it, where these studies can really punch their weight through. In 10 years' time, a study could lose momentum, lose factual analysis and understanding of economic impact. We just need to really get on with these things. And we're hoping that the new way of working, collaboration, but also influence that government is given to some national transport bodies like Transport for the North and Midlands Connect do really materialize. So it's an important balance, but let's talk about influence here for a change.
Thank you. And going for the two business organisation people on the panel, I'm conscious that you've been left out for a while. What does business, and especially Chris to start with, what does small business need from the emerging plans?
Well, clarity first of all, and the idea of a long-term vision that's actually deliverable and they can see the steps along the way. Infrastructure takes a long time to come into effect. You might put it in the wrong place if you're not careful. What small businesses need, they need to know that there is long-term. We need to break away from the short-term method of funding that we've got at the moment and start looking at much more longer-term appraisals, because we are in a state of change at the moment with the way that technology is leading innovation, the way that industry is being changed in all manner of industries. And not least of which the effect of climate change. That you know, we're currently talking with the Combined Authority about a clean air zone in Manchester. And my own view on it is, why is it limited to Manchester? You know, they don't have any control over the block of air directly above it. So perhaps it's something that ought to be extended. But there's all these new technologies, new opportunities coming through. But you need at least a 10 to 15 year horizon to be able to make proper, concrete business decisions. The Germans seem to do it reasonably well. I think Britain's sort of lost its focus a little bit, and I think really just having a much more reliable long-term view would be a massive benefit.
Dan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think sort of three things. Reasoned pressure, teeth, and consistency. Reasoned pressure, the North needs to make the case for itself. The North does not have any friends in London. Okay? Don't make that mistake. I mean, people will make noise and say warm things about the North because it's in. But please don't make the mistake of thinking that that means you've solved it. You haven't. Because the next problem will come along the day after, which will be more important for them. It's always the way. And that's why we've kind of ended up in the situation that we're in. So you've got to apply that pressure in a mature way, placing the North in the wider UK context. Not the North should have this because we're behind and it's your fault. Yeah, placing the North in the wider UK context and what the North can do for UK PLC. Teeth. Ian touched on this. TfN's got to be responsible for spending this money. If it's the budget holder, you know, if this is TfN money, then it can decide what it wants to spend the money on in its investment plan, you know, within reason. That's the only way to secure it. And consistency. We make this mistake all the time in UK infrastructure. Pro-infrastructure campaigns cost money to run. They're funded by industry, generally, very rarely by government. Anti-campaigns are run by angry people with free time. Our media friends in here prefer the angry people with free time because they have a more interesting story to tell. Okay? HS2, even though I haven't actively worked on that campaign since I think 2011, has never left me. Okay? In everything I've done, I've had to keep making the case that I was making 7 or 8 years ago because everybody else has forgotten to. And that's why we've got this television program on tonight, and that's why the Transport Secretary had to recently restate his support for it, all because he made the mistake just before Christmas of having the temerity to say that people needed to keep making the case for it. That was it. That's all he said. So, you know, it starts now. This is the very beginning. And if we're talking about 20 or 30 years, then if you're not still making the same level of noise or more in 20 or 30 years' time, you're not going to get to the end of the book.
Thank you. Right, we've got a little bit more time. I'm going to take 3 questions. I need 2 people put their hand up. Gentleman in the grey shirt, gentleman in the stripy shirt, and gentleman in the blue shirt. And gentleman in the green jumper as well. We take all, yeah, and then we'll quick fire answers, if you please.
Thank you. Really quick question. This morning, Councillor Judith Blake talked about her optimism for devolution. How do the panellists see devolution as being important for delivering the vision that we've heard from today?
Actually, it's going to be a long sprint. If you quickly answer and then move to the next person. Thank you. Anyone who wants to answer the devolution question?
I'll answer that. I don't think that this can necessarily be delivered without that, and I think that's actually explicit in the plan towards the back. I don't see any other way. I don't think, as I said in my speech at the start, that we can expect the plan in the way it's presented to be delivered unless we change the way in which the governance works.
Go on to the next question, yeah.
Hey, it's Julian Newton, and it's Grand Northern Railways. I just wonder what the panel's view is on the entrepreneur, because a lot of the projects that have been sort of earmarked seem to be public projects, i.e. from the government. What about the private sector? What do you think I, as an entrepreneur and trying to develop a east-west transport conduit, should do in terms of getting my project put forward?
Short answers, if you please. We have 28 seconds left.
We completely up for looking at things differently. As I said, we've got a very good relationship with government and the Network Rail, but we understand that, as you say, not only projects, sometimes it takes a project coming from you as a promoter, as a private sector investor, who can really change the case of something that has been dead for decades. And it creates a real momentum and a real economic sort of energy around that proposal. So we're up for always hearing new ideas, new proposals, and we need to be completely resilient to industry and entrepreneurs like yourselves within a longer-term pipeline understanding, but we've got to open up to new ideas and new ways of commissioning and new ways of delivering. It's absolutely important that we do that.
The FSB's been working with several sort of councils and public sector bodies around the Northwest in simplifying procurement options, which I'm not sure is entirely on the same track that you are. But the idea is that these smaller companies don't get frozen out of the opportunities that are available. There has been several very high-profile failures of the procurement policy. And the FSB's been, for years now, been focusing on trying to actually cut through all of the red tape and cut through the bureaucracy that's required by these tender processes. And it's required for a good reason, but it doesn't help the small business that's there trying to make a living. So that's something that we do work on extensively. Yeah.
I mean, I have in my coat pocket in the cloakroom the final draft of the CBI's forthcoming report on public sector procurement practices post-Brexit. Snappy, isn't it? And one of the problems we face is that the UK government has traditionally done, it's gold-plated European procurement standards. Now, industry is going to have to remain in line with European procurement standards, otherwise it's going to make it very difficult for us to trade Europe. But there are better ways to apply those standards, taking advantage of facilities available to smaller businesses to enable them to access the public sector marketplace. So keep an eye out for that one.
Have we got time? I'm conscious that it keeps flashing 0 at me. The 2 gentlemen that we'd already pre-asked, and then that's it. We've got to call it a day, unfortunately.
I'm Martin Higginson, Chairman of the North East England Policy Committee for Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. The Midlands seems to have a very well-devised set of local transport strategies, and I emphasise the word strategies, which come together to produce an overall set of policies which look as if they could work together. Hierarchies of different qualities of bus services, light rail networks, rail development networks, highway schemes and so on. In contrast, my impression, which I hope may be wrong, is that the northern strategies are rather more of a set of unrelated schemes which are struggling to come together to produce a whole. We have Manchester Airport developments and connections with HS2 and the sort of dichotomy between Northern Powerhouse Rail and the rest of the rail network. I wondered if any members of the panel could comment on that distinction and whether in fact North is catching up with, or in fact still in level pegging with the Midlands. Thank you.
10 seconds, please.
I know that in Manchester, Andy Burnham's looking at unifying the transport provision across buses, rail, and the airports as well. Unfortunately, it's a slow process because of legacy contracts with all the operators. But it is, quite frankly, a mess, and it needs to get addressed. Yeah.
Thank you. I would say the Midlands, particularly, there is still a lot of debate around local devolution, mayors, city regions, and some national transport bodies, for instance, and what is the interaction and so on. The Midlands, I thought you were going to say, is the Midlands looking at the Northeast? Because we actually are. We're looking at how we link to the ports of the North. But in terms of joined up, I think we are getting to that point that we understand clarification on roles and purposes, and there's a clear understanding of what a mayor for the West Midlands does in terms of transportation, and how Midlands Connect will then just concentrate on a strategic transport that actually does not acknowledge the boundaries of a combined authority or a city region or such. So we are quite proud of, we all have got our own plans. There's a lot of collaboration between the East and the West Midlands. But most importantly, the gap that we had was the strategic transport planning, and this is about network, rail, and Highways England programs, and that's what Midlands Connect has come into play to provide that united voice on a strategic transport. But I will say, there's the local transport and the diversity of local transport views will always be there, and there's a lot of competition because of the point that you made, funding and short-term funding is creating a lot of competition between towns and cities, which is not helpful either. So I think we'll always have that. But thank you. Yes, the Midlands, we're very proud of that.
Would anybody else like to come in?
Yeah, I'm slightly surprised that you say it looks like a series of unconnected schemes. I think if you look in the strategic transport plan in terms of how it's been developed, it's very much been done on a corridor basis, and those corridors attempt to match the kind of economic reality of the North geography. And those corridors have been developed, and the programs within them have been developed in consultation with businesses and local authorities within those corridors, and it's been done on a mode blind basis. So it's not saying, we're going to spend this amount of rail money or this amount of road money. It's saying this is the economy, these are the communities that these corridors serve. How best do we address those needs? And I think there has been a lot of effort put into making sure that the Northern Powerhouse Rail project in particular fits within that, because it's not a new railway line, it's not a discrete railway line in the sense that High Speed 2 is. It's actually a mixture of using High Speed 2 infrastructure, some new infrastructure, Manchester Leeds being the obvious new capacity that's created, but also making use of a whole lot of existing infrastructure, albeit much enhanced through the programme. So it may be worth having a chat with some of my colleagues in the strategy team about how that has been delivered. I would certainly hope on kind of close examination of the strategic transport plan that kind of coherence of view that's embedded in it does come through.
Do we have time for the final gentleman? I feel very sorry. I'm sorry, Barry. It was in the back. Well, final question, and then we'll wrap it up. Please keep it short because there's far more exciting things to come.
Hello, Alan Scarisbrick from a consultant to the Mersey Gateway project. project delivered on time and on budget. You're in this strategy phase, and I do wholly appreciate how it works and how long it takes. And I appreciate it's not gone through the central government process. Has Transport for the North, have they started looking and considering it, the actual delivery plan, beyond the strategy, of how they're going to actually do the doing?
Yes. Yes, I think it's yes, I mean, I was just noting that I did some work on the, I was working for KPMG at the time, in 2001, modelling the Mersey Gateway, and I don't think it was the first time that model had been run. I think there is a whole different rich debate about how we deliver infrastructure projects in this country more effectively and more efficiently, which is probably not for now, given that the two big zeros are flashing at us from floor level. But yes, this is clearly part of the next phase of work that TfN needs to do, and I think a key part of that is understanding the pipeline effect. That in the past, big projects in the north have been done as one-offs. You know, we start, we kind of corral thoughts together, and then we finish again, and it takes decades often for that to happen. We can't go on like that. It's a crazy way of operating. So a big part of having a pipeline and a level of control over the funding is that it allows you to start planning much more effectively. It allows you to put in place ways of working. It allows companies to build up the skills bases and the infrastructure that they need. There's a whole series of benefits that flow from that. So yes, as I say, there's a longer conversation, but yes, be assured that this isn't something that isn't at the forefront of our minds.
Does anybody have any more on the panel have anything to add to that? I'm sure it's all the same consensus.
Yeah, I was going to say, to reassure, the point that Iain's making is so important. We need to invest more time in investment in pipeline development and proper pipeline development. In the past, it's been rushed too much, jumped too much into a solution. We need to understand what is it about, what's the solution, when, and where the funding is going to come. All of that takes time. At least with TfN, I will say that's what you got today. It's a clear commitment in pipeline and giving all certainty of what's going to happen when. That's really important.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience for listening. We're still within the parameters of the time we're allocated. I've been asked to tell you about the plenary session, which I understand we're back in here now, I think. So, and after that, there's a Dragon's Den session. So do stay for that. And thank you to the panel, and thank you to all. Thank you.